All right, hello, my name is Franco Webb with Core Computer Technologies and Web Security. I'm a retired Master Sergeant with 7 Special Forces Group. I'm the 2020 MAC co-chairman, and I'm your moderator for the 2020 Command Performance Virtual event. Welcome to everyone that's joining us by web. A few housekeeping items. You may submit your questions via the chat box on the right side of your screen. It is a listen-in only event. And we'll use your questions as time permits. We'd like to recognize our sponsors. Campbell University is our presenting sponsor. Our silver sponsors are Manna Church, Piedmont Natural Gas, and Methodist University. Bronze sponsors are Duke Energy and the Fayetteville Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. And we'd like to thank our media partners, Array Magazine, Beasley Media, Cumulus Broadcasting, the Fayetteville Observer, Up and Coming Weekly, and our annual sponsor, Caldwell Banker Advantage. We acknowledge and thank you for your service in supporting and improving our community. We owe a special thank you to the City of Fayetteville, our MAC board member, Christoph Bauer, and to Kevin Arata and his team in corporate communications for the technology and venue to make this event happen. We especially thank Fayetteville Mayor Mitch Colvin for allowing the use of the council chambers, and we'd like him to offer the opportunity to welcome you.
Thank you, Mr. Franco. Certainly, Major General Kraft and Major General LeBeau and Mr. Holcomb, thank you for taking time to come to City Hall to share a bit about the state of affairs within your organizations, within our Military Affairs Council. We really enjoy the partnership we have with Fort Bragg and our service members, your service members and their families, keeping the members of the Military Affairs Council, many of whom are logged in today through Zoom, informed about what's happening out at Fort Bragg is critical for our community. The vast majority of your service members and their families live in Fayetteville and the surrounding communities. The more we know where they work and what they do and the challenges that they face, the better we can serve them. And on behalf of the other 9 members of City Council and myself, many of whom are veterans and military spouses themselves, we certainly appreciate you taking the time and effort to come in to us today to share this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Colvin, for those remarks. Okay, we'd like to take a moment and recognize other military, city, and county officials that have joined us online. I'd like to say thank you to Major General Arlen DeBlick from Forces Command, CASA Dan Diedrich, Sally Shutt, Assistant County Manager, Doug Hewitt, our City Manager, and Tisha Waddell, City Councilwoman. Thank you all for joining us online today. And now we'd like to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. All right, I think you all will enjoy our new format this year for the Command Performance event. We're doing a panel discussion format with some very key questions for each of the commands. To begin with, we'll invite each of our presenters to give a brief self-introduction. And so we are going to begin with Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, Franco. And also thank the Greater Fayetteville Chamber for their vision to build prosperity and resilience within our community. I also like to thank the Military Affairs Committee or the Military Affairs Council for their mission to enhance relationship and strengthen understanding between the community and our military. In these areas, along with many others, we are truly one team. Mission statements are important, and our mission statement is to prepare for any conflict and arm the joint force with the world's premier Army Special Operation Forces. We are vital to the nation through our unique capabilities to advance partnerships, influence adversarial behavior, execute special operations, and crisis response. Now, many of our audience today know us very well. Franco, you being one of them, a lifelong Green Beret, and to my left, my friend and colleague, Major General Jim Kraft, who has commanded at every level within our special forces, he has probably forgotten more than I'll ever know about special operations. For those of you who are familiar with us, this will be a refresher. And for those of you who have not yet come to know Army Special Operations, this is a basic primer. Our most important and most prominent feature of Army Special Operations are our Special Forces, our Green Berets as they're known. However, that's not all we are. We are, in fact, much more. We have a psychological operations capability. These are our information warriors who, through cyber and electronic and printed means, inform our partners, inform our friendly populace, and deceive our military adversaries and our enemies. We also have civil affairs soldiers who are our warrior diplomats. They engage with local leaders, governments, and communities to enable our military objectives. Together, our special forces, our psychological operations, and our civil affairs soldiers combine under the motto, De Oppresso Liber, or to free the oppressed. We also have the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School, which is our academic institution. From the very first day of assessment and selection, all the way through graduate level degrees in joint strategic studies, each one of our special forces, psychological operations, civil affairs soldiers enter through our academic portals for training and professional development. On any one day, we'll have 24,000 soldiers and servicemen and women from all the U.S. services, as well as 16 countries as part of the Special Warfare Center and School. Our Army Special Operations Aviation Command, or more specifically, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, are the finest rotary wing pilots and the finest rotary wing unit in the world. They operate in the most dark, desolate, and hostile regions of the world, from the highest elevations in Afghanistan to the desert in Syria. They move and support not only Army Special Operations soldiers, but special operators from the Navy, Marines, and the Air Force. Last but not least, we have the 75th Ranger Regiment, the world's finest light infantry unit. Our Rangers have three principal missions. The first is to conduct raids. I'd venture to say that right now, somewhere in the Central Command region, one of our Ranger units is either preparing for or conducting a raid at this moment. The other missions of the Rangers are crisis response in conjunction with the Global Response Force and then the Joint Force. We provide an element for crisis response. In fact, I'll take a moment here to emphasize the importance of joint operations for our Army and for our nation. One of the great lessons that we've learned over these past 19 years is the tremendous synergy and the power that joint operations bring to bear. And so our partners in the conventional force are absolutely critical for our success. And the final mission for the Rangers is this global response force, not just for crisis response, but for more deliberate and planned missions as well. There's 35,000 of us in USASOC, 10,000 in this community. And we, in fact, are part of this community. We're in the neighborhoods, we're in places of worship, we're in schools as part of the Parent-Teacher Alliance, and we're also coaches, mentors, and advisors everywhere within the Sandhill regions and the Fayetteville area. And we're proud to be part of that. So that completes my presentation. Thank you, Franco.
Thank you, Mr. Holcomb. Next up, we're going to speak to Justin Mitchell, who is now the acting garrison commander.
That's right.
So give us your introduction.
Good afternoon. As you said, I'm Justin Mitchell. I'm the acting garrison manager of Fort Bragg. And it's great to be here to talk with our family, because 2/3 of our population lives off post. As Mr. Holcomb was saying, and we can only house 1/3 of our population on post. And so our community is your community, our volunteers, our neighbors are your neighbors, and we are your military installation. So my perspective is I'm the supporting force for the supported deploying command, and so we run the city of Fort Bragg, and we do a lot of work with Mayor Coven and the city of Fayetteville and the Sand Hills community. I have about 3,000 people to run the 5th largest city in North Carolina, about 1,200 appropriated fund civilians, a little over 1,000 non-appropriated fund civilians, which are people that are paid for by money we generate on Fort Bragg. And then I have about 800 contractors that work primarily in our Director of Public Works and things like that. So we have basically a city atmosphere. We have 9 schools. We have our own school district. We have 17 child care centers, 14 gymnasiums, and 13 access control points. And like I said, we are your Army installation. So we want you to come and enjoy Fort Bragg. And it's the largest gated golf community in North Carolina, I would guess. And our gates just have armed guards on them to protect and vet folks. And so, but we are a welcoming group, and we would like you to come at least watch the fireworks, because we are still going to have fireworks on the 4th of July. So if you think about any municipality, we have a group of folks that provide child care. About 1,200 children use our child care centers. We have about 400 people that do our public works, which is about 1/3 of what we're authorized or should have to run a city of that capacity. We have over 1,200 miles of roads. And so I always get comments on our potholes, and I say our pothole growing program is going very well. Our pothole repair program needs a little work, but we're working very hard to keep the infrastructure up for America's contingency force, and to make sure that as these great, amazing troopers, service members of all branches get ready to do their business, that the infrastructure is there to support them to do it. We have 17,000 barracks spaces, so we have a large group of single soldiers, 6,104 homes. And I've talked with Doug Hewitt, the city manager of Fayetteville, and I said the only difference really between you and I is I'm responsible for every facility on Fort Bragg, just under 9,000 of them, 52 million square feet of facility space, whereas he's got a tax base and responsibility for a larger area, just not as many buildings. And so we have good conversations, good working relationship with them. We have about 31 military folks that work in the garrison. And so our brigade, as you would say, a 5,000 person brigade is mostly civilians that do that. We do have simulations. We run simulations. We run training ranges, and I believe General Kraft's going to talk a little bit about our ranges and some of the missions that we take on. And so we are often called the center of the universe. And when I first got here 6 years ago, I heard the story that, when the president picks up the phone and dials 911, it rings at Fort Bragg. Well, I chuckled, and I thought that was a pretty good byline. And about a month later, I realized that it's absolutely true. And I think that most recently on New Year's Eve, when we deployed just under 3,000 folks to Iraq in a very short timeline, and recently deployed some soldiers in a 2-hour timeline, that in fact, when the nation has a crisis or a defense support of civilian agencies or a international crisis of a tsunami, hurricane, typhoon, somewhere in the world, that you can bet somebody from Fort Bragg is on their way. So the part of me that I take very seriously is the part that is my job to make sure the infrastructure and the support nodes and deployment nodes are all green, and that I'm supporting this amazing group to get where they need to be with what they need to be there. And with that, I'll end my opening comments and look forward to any questions as we get down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Next up, we have Major General Jim Kraft from 18th Airborne Corps.
Hey, thanks, Franco, and to Mayor Colvin. Sir, thanks for being here. Thanks for the kind remarks. Most importantly, thanks for your leadership and service to this great community. Appreciate that. To the MACRA at large, to our city and county commissioners and leaders out there, thanks for the great support you provide our soldiers and family. I have called my wife. I'm fortunate to have a lovely wife and 4 children that have been born and raised here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So this is home. And when I look across this community, I'd venture to say there's not a more patriotic community on the planet. And that goes to a lot of hard work, dedication, support, love, and all of that from each and every one of you. So I appreciate that very much. I took over as the Deputy Commander of 18th Airborne Corps in November, having spent a year over in Korea as the Director of Ops for kind of all things South Korea. And what a great job this is. Prior to that, career Special Forces officer, lots of deployments, and lots of experience in Iraq, Syria, and other places like that. But this job is very unique. If General Carrillo was here, my boss, he actually wears two hats. He's the Senior Mission Commander, so he handles much of the garrison-like portfolio that Justin just elegantly kind of laid out there, and the management of this incredible installation. And if you look at it, it's the largest troop concentration within the United States Army, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So we're looking at over 53,000 soldiers here alone, providing services to over 120,000 retirees and their families. Nearly 6,000, actually more than that, buildings out there, 83 and some change of live fire ranges. So it is truly a city, to Justin's earlier point there. So we help to manage that, provide the right training venue for our forces, and provide the right services for the morale and well-being of both our soldiers and their families. But General Carrillo is also the commander of 18th Airborne Corps, of course, America's Contingency Corps. Our charter, if called upon tonight, with a moment's notice, we are prepared to deploy anywhere in the world, fight, and win. And if you look at our Corps, it's pretty big. 4 divisions underneath 18th Airborne Corps. The 82nd, which all of you are intimately familiar with, resides here, of course. 3rd Infantry Division out of Fort Stewart, Georgia. 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum up in New York. And then the 101st, of course, at Fort Campbell. So 4 active divisions under our portfolio, 1 expeditionary support brigade, and 7 separate brigades. And that ranges from military intelligence, engineers, 7th transportation. We actually have a very large Navy that falls under Army Navy that falls under 18th Airborne Corps. So it's a heck of a portfolio. And as I sit here this morning, 12,000 soldiers from 18th Airborne Corps are deployed throughout the world, supporting 6 different geographic combatant commanders. And to be part of that is something very special, and something you all should be able to take a great deal of pride in, that rests within the shadows of your communities. Good to be here. Look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Major General Kraft. And finally, Major General Eugene LeBeau, Chief of Staff for Force Comp Command.
Great. Well, good afternoon. It's again, my name is Gene LeBeau, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. Opportunity to meet your mayor, and fantastic leadership and service, as stated earlier. Franco, thank you for your service to the MAC and to the council members. Thank you very much for your service to the community. And it's my pleasure to call Fort Bragg and Fayetteville home for the first time. I've been to Fort Bragg on many occasions, as folks in the Army would, but surprising that I have yet to be assigned here until now. And so honored to be here as part of your community. My family's going to join us here in August, so they aren't here yet, but they're looking forward to it already, and an opportunity just to explore around Fayetteville, and very, very impressed with your communities. And so we look forward to calling this home. So joined U.S. Army Forces Command just 3 weeks ago. And so I'm learning quite a bit. They say you drink from the fire hose. Well, I've got 2 fire hoses that I'm drinking from as I'm learning U.S. Army Forces Command. All right, the Army's largest command, over 750,000 personnel within our portfolio, including the 18th Airborne Corps and 2 other corps and another corps that we're standing up as well. So enormous responsibility, but the primary mission for U.S. Army Forces Command is very simple, actually, and that's simply to prepare combat-ready, globally responsive forces to be able to build and sustain readiness to address any of the needs that our combatant commanders have of our forces. Simple mission statement. but quite a challenge for us to accomplish. And as articulated here by these gentlemen, it honestly takes a community of soldiers, community of family members, and community of supporters as represented in the MAC and in the Fayetteville community to be able to make things happen at Fort Bragg or at many of our other installations throughout the United States and throughout the world. And so it's a pleasure for U.S. Army Forces Command to call Fort Bragg our home. We're a tenant unit on this, and so we're quite honored on that. And so on behalf of General Michael Garrett, our commander, and the entire forces U.S. Army Forces Command team, it's our pleasure to be here and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General LeBeau. Okay, now we're going to move on to the panel discussion. I'll ask each of you questions specific to your command, and then we'll go through the rotation. At the end, we're going to try to do a Q&A from the audience if we have time permits. They'll be popping them in on the chat box as we go, and we'll pick out some questions to be able to ask you. So the very first question is actually a question for all of you. So, and then we'll get into individual questions. And of course, everybody always wants to know because of what's going on right now with this pandemic. So please tell us how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected your command. For example, precautionary measures, training, quarantines, PCSing, deployments and redeployments, and how that's all affected the different commands. And Mr. Mitchell, we'll start with you.
That's a great question, and you know the pandemic has been an interesting dynamic to what we're trying to do here, and so we immediately got together with the senior leadership and talked about what are our primary priorities. And the one thing about Fort Bragg compared to any other installation is we never close. During hurricanes and even during a pandemic, we simply don't close. We still have to operate. We still have to be able to project force, and my team has to be able to support emergency workers in child care, for example. We have to be able to process people ETSing out of the military and or ID cards for people that need to be able to move around. And so we took a look at our primary missions and the priority staffing, and we sent a lot of people home to work from home. We have a group teleworking, which is about 30% of our folks are teleworking right now. And then we did keep about 25% of our staff back that we called mission essential to provide those child care and things like that for services, the gate guards, the law enforcement, emergency services, and folks like that. And we've been following along with the senior commander and Governor Cooper's guidance and his phased approach. And as we see the data-driven decision-making, not necessarily timeline, but data-driven, we started to peel back services to provide more and more support. For example, we were looking at the traffic going through our access control point this morning, and we're during the week averaging between 74 and 78,000 a day, which is only 10,000 off of kind of a normal day last year. So we are, in terms of people coming on and off post, pretty close to back to normal. But we still have about 30% of our folks either teleworking or working from home. If they have higher risk, diabetes, high blood pressure, something like that, we've asked them to go ahead and stay home and protect themselves, because as my AMC leader says, is we have to protect ourselves to protect the force so the force can protect the nation. And so that's the way we've been operating. We don't close, and we're supporting what we need to project power. Thank you.
Thank you. Major General LeBeau, we'll just go on around. Everybody can answer the same question.
Sure. So from the ForceCon's perspective, right? So again, a broad spectrum, right? Really responsible for the readiness of the Army, and so how do we go about that? Well, a number of challenges, right? Especially early on with this, but it just simply was. We talk about agility and adaptability of our formations, not only our units themselves, but all the staffs and other supporting individuals, all right, including our civilian staffs to make that happen. And so our charge was to maintain that readiness as best we possibly could. And I'm proud to note that ForceCom and the supporting units have done just a fantastic job in ensuring that did indeed take place. So our requirements remain unchanged, right, from worldwide deployments, et cetera. Those things do not change. And so we've got to meet those requirements. And so how do we do that in that environment? How do we do that, right? And so our number one priority, of course, in Forces Command is to ensure we deliver decisive total Army readiness to meet those requirements, right? And so FORSCOM units have continued building experts through individual and small unit collective training. We're just now completing a Security Force Assistance Brigades training rotation at Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And so not only the several thousand soldiers that were going through training at the time and support personnel, et cetera, not one incident of COVID-19 had occurred actually prior to the start of that training, and or during the continuation of that training. So very impressive measure that took place to guard against potential impacts on that training during the training itself. And so we're starting next month another rotation at our National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California as well. And that's going to be a National Guard rotation. And we've learned a lot of lessons through that training center there at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and communicating that to our National Training Center at Fort Irwin as well. So hopefully we can see the similar success in that. But there's additional challenges. So we talk about the total Army, the total force, and of course that's our active component Army, our Army National Guard, and our Army Reserve. That's our total Army, and that's what U.S. Army Forces Command is about, is ensuring that total Army is ready. So, okay, taking a active component unit to training may be easier in terms of some controls, et cetera, although it's still challenging. I wouldn't call it easy by any means. Absolute number of challenges. But now we're taking a brigade from the National Guard that are coming from a number of different locations, et cetera, and how do we make sure that they come together to meet those training requirements under this COVID-19 environment that we operate in. And so additional challenges exist in there, but we've been doing that and we're doing it well. And so we look forward to continuing the momentum with respect to reestablishing training at the highest levels. Of course, we'll hear, I'm sure, from the 18th Airborne Corps with respect to activities there in the 82nd Airborne Division as well as 18th Airborne Corps. But they've resumed their training, and we're continuing with support with our units and our national military exercises in Europe, also doing that in the Pacific as well, as an example. And so what are we doing in terms of that training mitigation? Right, out of healthy precaution, the Army's adjusted combat training center rotations to protect our soldiers. Right, we actually halted some and shifted some of those dates. Right, our allied partners and Army civilians are participating in these training events as well in order to reduce that spread of COVID-19. Also, our FORSCOM units are ensuring all individuals associated with the rotations have multiple masks, not just one, but multiple. Okay, we tend to misplace those or something like that. Receive regular temperature checks and are tested before, during, and after large training events to maintain what we're calling a healthy bubble. And so we've learned a lot through this effort. There's many silver linings to this. Just as Mr. Mitchell said, we've got upwards now of about 30% or so of the FORSCOM headquarters staff that are currently teleworking. And we learned a great deal in that in terms of the productivity level was tremendous. Even when we had 50% or more that were teleworking at a time, the productivity level really didn't decline. In fact, we saw great levels of productivity throughout. And so we're seeing opportunities here for teleworking, virtual work, to continue. We see that too also in the headquarters itself in terms of just relationships with our subordinate units and increased use of the virtual contacts, et cetera. It's actually increasing communications. You wouldn't think that would be the case, but it's actually increasing communications for us in many instances. And so those are silver linings that come out of this. Still challenges ahead for us, but U.S. Army Forces Command is pushing hard to ensure we meet those readiness requirements. Thanks.
Thank you, Major General Buff. Major General Kraft?
Yeah, Gene, that's extremely well said. And we've had great rudder steers from Army Forces Command throughout this thing. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we have to be prepared, ready to deploy at a moment's notice, fight tonight and win. So much like our first responders, the medical community, police forces, fire department, we couldn't just take a knee and wait for this COVID thing to pass. And I think we took a lot of prudent measures to get after our training readiness while protecting the force. And that was the constant tension. And we actually deployed many forces throughout this COVID environment. You've probably heard on open source media about the 44th Med Brigade providing support to New York City. You probably heard about 82nd Paratroopers launching up to Washington, D.C. Should they have been required. They quickly returned home shortly thereafter, but they deployed on a moment's notice. There are gunneries ongoing, other types of live fires ongoing. But how do we mitigate the risks to the force? And that's where we have a whole of Bragg working group that meets weekly with all the tenant units to kind of look at these wicked problem sets to get after readiness while protecting our folks. And we've implemented such things as getting rid of trusted traveler at our gates, that folks actually have to have an approved pass or have to have an ID card. And that's not to keep people out, that's to keep our ecosystem, if you will, relatively known on the installation, so you don't have out-of-area, out-of-state travelers coming in, potentially infectious, asymptomatic, spreading it throughout Fort Bragg. When we look at training, we've actually increased the level approval authorities for training of our forces. And that's not to micromanage, but if I had a platoon out there, an infantry platoon out there that wants to conduct training, the brigade commander has to approve that. Why? Not that the training's sophisticated, but to make sure we've crosswalked and taken prudent mitigation measures with hand washing stations, with physical distancing, with daily medical screens, temperature screenings, etc. And that's happening on a daily basis. It's really neat to see. We also limited a lot of our MWR activities up front, but Justin's teams and all, we talk about that. We just opened up the gyms most recently. No more than 50% capacity, the physical distancing, the screening at the desk, the hand washing between each bench out there, no cardio machines. So these are all we're taking all of these decisions very, very seriously, getting back to normalcy to the degree we can, and absolutely maintaining readiness. So.
All right, thank you, Major General Kraft. Mr. Holcomb?
We've got 3 lines of effort to attack the pandemic: operational, academic, and administrative. Operationally, we've got 13 locations across the continental United States. We're deployed in 45 countries. So being attentive and supportive of those local and international rules and doing risk assessments in each one of those areas is very important to us. But overall, it's been the ability to test and protect the force, as Major General LeBeouf said earlier, before, during, and after deployments and training exercises have been very important to us. Academically, we have not really missed a beat. The schoolhouse has remained open. All our courses are up and running. Through the help of a lot of senior commanders and commanders throughout the Army, we've been able to get our assessment and selection candidates to Fort Bragg and elsewhere without risk and in an expeditious manner. So we're doing well academically as well, keeping the pipeline open. And then finally, administratively, just like our other panel members have said, telework has worked out extremely well for us. So I won't repeat what's already been said. But it's one of those practices that we started by exception that I think we'll do for a long period of time, if not forever, after whatever normal looks like returns back to us. And we've also taken these challenges as an opportunity. 3 of our special forces groups have made personal protective equipment for the local communities. Even our spouses in Japan, are one of our forward station units, have made masks for the local Okinawan community. We've got medics and doctors working in hospitals within the United States to help with the pandemic. And one thing that we're really proud of is our parachute demonstration team has taken part in this entire southeast region to salute our first responders and medical professionals here in Fayetteville, Charlotte, Raleigh. We've been just finished a salute in Mississippi, and here in the upcoming days and weeks we'll be in Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. So again, been some challenges, but I think we've converted those into opportunities for us.
All right, now I'm going to ask some individual questions, and Major General Kraft, so since you hit on the readiness deployment of the 82nd, I'm going to ask you your question first. After all these years, How do you keep the 82nd ready to deploy anywhere in the world in 18 hours or less? And can you explain DRF to our audience?
Sure. Thanks for that question. So the concept of being rapidly deployable really started back in kind of 1956, if you will. So here at Bragg, we've always kind of had a get ready, and it's changed the terminology to blow out or get out of here on a moment's notice. That has changed over time, and I'll hit that in just a second. But when you look at keeping the 82nd ready, there's varying degrees of readiness, and it used to be called, I saw, the question we talked about was the DRF. That was an acronym that was widely used. Beginning in fiscal year 20, that changed to the IRF, or the Immediate Response Force. Think of that as someone that goes out, and I'm not going to go over specific timings of this in this unclassified venue, but we're talking hours, not days. And then there's a larger force, the Contingency Response Force, that should that initial force not be able to blunt whatever the threat or contingency is out there, then we have follow-on forces to kind of take care of business and be decisive and win. So when a unit is put on a ready status, they go through a series of training events and a certification event. So before they say, I am ready, they go through a pretty arduous process, and then they send a memo up or a briefing to General Carrilla, my boss, that says, yea, verily, I agree, you are ready, and then it goes ultimately up to ForceCom, all the way up to General Garrett, who validates said readiness. So readiness not an issue. Obviously, they got to hear, as I'm sure you saw or read about in the media, when they deployed very rapidly over to Kuwait following the drone strike on Soleimani on 3 January.
Thank you. Mr. Holcomb, what are the impacts of the 7th Special Forces Operations Group being moved to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida?
Well, I think in the early years of their move, just like every other base realignment and enclosure unit and organization, there was some growing pains, some relationships that had to be formed with the local community, and in the case of 7th Group, within the leadership of Eglin Air Force Base. But I think we're in a good place now. We've been able to settle in well. The ability to project power from Eglin and the support structure that the Army and the Air Force has built for us at Eglin is good and getting better all the time. But just like everything else, the most important part of success is relationships. And going back to my opening statement on this, we have formed a good, cohesive, and unified effort at Eglin with Eglin Air Force Base leaders and our own Red Empire 7th Group.
Well, thank you. Mr. Mitchell, excuse me. The real ID that the country is coming to, will that affect entry into Fort Bragg?
I guess the short answer is no. So to get onto Fort Bragg, right now with the doing away of trusted traveler, everyone has to present a scannable ID. And so if you're coming on Fort Bragg, you have a reason to be there. And at the All-American, we have a reception center, visitor welcome center, where we vet people to get a pass for however long their professional or personal visit's going to be. And so with the real ID, you present one form of ID. And after 1 October, if it's not a real ID, you're going to have to present 2 forms of ID to get that pass. But for us specifically, you're still going to have to be vetted. You're still going to have a scannable ID of some kind to get through the access control points. And in August, we're going to start fielding our AIE-4, which is the latest version of our scannable vetting system, which does a very rapid background check of people. And people, I think, are surprised at how quickly that's updated in a 24-hour cycle. So if, Justin Mitchell is doing something nefarious, up in Rayford where I live, and I come in 24 hours later with some type of warrant for my arrest, I'm usually shocked at the fact that they're going to go ahead and roll me up right there at the gate, because that is already within our system to check on people, including terrorist watch lists and things like that. I didn't bring any data with me, but we do have a significant number of folks that we detain at the gates. And that's not to, again, dissuade anybody from being there, but that's our responsibility to keep our people safe and secure. And we vet everybody that comes through. So the real ID itself is going to have negligible to no impact, other than after October, if you come to get your pass, if you don't have the real ID, you'll need 2 forms of ID. That's basically it.
Okay. Thank you. Major General LeBeau, how do you and the top commanders in FORSCOM divide the duties of such a large command?
We do it actually through a couple of means. One is first of all what we refer to as terms of reference. So it's a formal means to help define lanes of responsibility, et cetera. The other piece of that is of course understanding the strengths of the individuals, right, and what they bring to the table. What is it from their experiences, their background, et cetera, that they bring that can add additional value to our mission sets. Of course, our commander is General Garrett, and so he looks at the wide expanse of U.S. Army Forces Command. There's 750,000 plus personnel and overall readiness for the Army. So he's got to be focused on not only what's happening now, but really what's happening further into the future too as well, and really peering in and being perspective and really projecting out. All right, what is it that the Army is going to need, and anticipate what those needs are, and identify those needs before they get here, so that we can respond and be able to get to that. We have a Deputy Commanding General, so Lieutenant General Lee Quintus, and so he comes to us with great background as well, having served at Forces, U.S. Army Forces Command as the operations officer before, and just coming out of Division Command too as well. And so as Deputy Commanding General, he's responsible really focusing on critical readiness areas and milestones across our Army as well. And so looking at things, what's happening now currently, and in the near future items, if you will, as well. And so and he particularly focused on items within our national training centers at Fort Irwin, California, Fort Polk, our Joint Readiness Training Center, as well as our Security Force Assistance Commands and our Seaburn Command as well. And so all of our what we call direct reporting units. And so a lot of his focus is on those particular units and overall readiness as well. And as a Chief of Staff, I serve really within the headquarters to ensure that our headquarters is functioning at the highest level possible, that we're as efficient as we can be in our operations, that the staff, which, by the way, the team at U.S. Army Forces Command is just fantastic, from the senior civilians to our military personnel. I've never seen a more cohesive and talented staff that I've served with in my Army career as U.S. Army Forces Command. And so part of our challenge as leaders in this organization is how do we add value and ensure that talent is put to the best use possible, and we've got that great use. But the most important thing is ensuring that we as leaders are focusing on our mission at hand, and ensuring that we have the readiness, that we advance the Army in terms of modernization, and of course that we reform the Army and we're good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars to ensure that we're maximizing our readiness and that return on investment. And then we also have another individual, another Deputy Commanding General, and that's Major General Brian Harris, who is with the Army National Guard, and so represents those equities in the Army National Guard and helps further inform U.S. Army Forces Command from that total Army perspective, the active component, the Army National Guard perspective. And my background is U.S. Army Reserve, so I also bring in the U.S. Army Reserve component too as well. And so we divide up those duties, at least among the leadership in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holcomb, Fort Bragg's been very fortunate when it comes to funding for military construction projects. For the last couple of years, a number of those projects have been located around the Special Warfare Center and school area. Can you give us an update on the status of these projects and why they're very important to your command in the U.S. Army?
Well, the campus where a lot of our construction is taking place is in support of the Army Special Operations Center of Excellence. There are a number of centers of excellence in the Army. We're one of them for special operations. So a centralized campus environment, so our faculty, cadre, and staff can integrate and collaborate and meet centrally is very important to us. We've got a number of projects either complete or underway to support that vision. We've recently completed an education building, state-of-the-art 21st century building for our education group. We're in the midst of building a training group building, which should be done early to mid next year, and then an advanced skill training facility that's scheduled to be complete in fiscal year 22. So all those facilities are designed to make us more efficient, more effective, and make the training environment the best it can possibly be. And so we're very grateful to Special Operations Command for the military construction money they've given us to build those buildings, and to Fort Bragg, because a lot of what we need to support those facilities comes through the maintenance and repair and the infrastructure that surrounds those buildings. So it's been truly a team effort, and we're making steady and significant progress.
Thank you. Major General Kraft, how are all the major units under your command brought together to train?
Great question, and a challenge. I mean, we are a very, very large organization, geographically dispersed. So first and foremost, everything we do is training. That's our mindset, and it starts first and foremost with a daily calendar, a weekly calendar, a battle rhythm event, as we like to call it, battle rhythm schedule. And that varies from commanding general touch points with his division commanders every week. That is a daily COVID update with all of those parties every day. It is leadership development, seminars on all things large-scale combat operations against a near-peer competitor. You know, we've been fighting counterinsurgency for the last 19 plus years. So how do we take this incredible organization with those 4 divisions I mentioned and the separates and bring them together to a common purpose against a pretty determined, pretty large, pretty sophisticated military out there? We also have Warfighter Exercises. And we have a mission command training program, folks, that come out and test, basically, evaluate, coach, teach, mentor on our mission command systems to fight against one of those peer competitors. And it lasts anywhere from 6 to about 10 days, where you bring all of these components together. Largely think of being out in tents with camouflage netting and such, bringing them all together and really running hard 24/7 for a good week or so. It's another way we get after getting this band together. And then last, we have many command post exercises that we work throughout the year. Matter of fact, we have 3 coming up in July and August, leading into a September warfighter. So bringing them together, a challenge, but everything we do is training, and every battle rhythm event or schedule event that we have, all of those participants I mentioned earlier are involved in each and every one of them.
All right, thank you. All right, getting near the end here, and I still have more questions for you guys, but I understand that we have some pretty good questions that came in from the audience. So I'm going to defer over to Christine and let her ask you some audience questions.
Okay, we do have one that's come in for Justin Mitchell from our former MAC chairman, George Brees, and he would like to know, would it be accurate to say that today that 1 out of every new Army soldier is a female?
I love George, but I think that's probably a FORSCOM or an 18th Airborne Corps, because I support them. I don't necessarily count them. And so I guess I'll have to defer that. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if somebody else does. I might have to phone a friend back home to get that answer. So thanks, George. You got me on the first question. So.
Are you seeing more female enlistments?
Yeah, I don't have the ratio either, but I'll just say that women in Army Special Operations have been important and an integral part of us for decades, and it's even more so. It's growing more so today, and we welcome that entry into previously unentered ranks within our formations when that day comes. This is a diverse Army. It's a global Army. So anytime we can bring that diversity into our ranks, it's a welcome event.
We also have a question relating to the fireworks, and that is wanting to know what COVID-19 pandemic precautions and special arrangements will be made for the fireworks.
Yeah, and first off, we're not going to have the normal Fort Bragg concert and open post event, which I really look forward to as one of the signature events that we do this year. And so basically, in order to have the social distancing, we're only going to have a fireworks show. To get on to post itself, it'll be DID, ID card holders, and people that have normal CAC access to Fort Bragg. But it's an 18-minute show, and it's launched from the polo field. And so if you're anywhere near Simmons, Smith Lake, and there's our places off post where you can actually get a really good view of what I would consider, and I even was stationed in Japan and have seen one of the classiest, most exciting fireworks displays anywhere in America or anywhere in the world from my perspective. But so it's gonna be on the 4th of July. It's gonna be a fireworks show only, and it's gonna be a little over 18 minutes, and we are gonna execute that on post.
That sounds like a very fitting way to commemorate the 4th of July. We also have a question from Tammy Thurman, who is with Piedmont Natural Gas and a member of our MAC board and chairman of our Spouses in Military event. And she would like to know, how can we better serve and support the heroes on Fort Bragg? What do you all need from us and from the Military Affairs Council?
Well, since Tammy and I are good friends and we've worked together for the 6 years that I've been at Fort Bragg, and I feel, first off, I feel so blessed to have the opportunity to support such an amazing organization. And Franco, I forgot to thank you for your service as well. But Tammy and I have talked about redundancy, and what one of the things that we need to make sure that we have on Fort Bragg is resiliency, particularly as it comes to our utilities and our support functions. And we just recently reviewed the after-action review of our energy resiliency readiness exercise, where we consciously turned off the power on Fort Bragg for about 8 hours. Got a lot of attention, a lot of excitement, but it really gave us an opportunity to, no kidding, see ourselves. Well, I didn't do that. I'm just saying.
Start off with that. And again, we really appreciate all the work that's been done to date. I think amplifying our message is critical. We remain an all-volunteer Army. We're all extremely busy, many in harm's way as we sit here today in this nice building here. So telling the story of what the American taxpayer is getting for his or her money, I think is critically important, because it is an all-volunteer force, and young men and women have to make a choice whether to ultimately join this rank. And in light of that, our Army is looking to recruit 10,000 folks, which is called Army National Career Days. And they're looking for 10,000 folks to join a rank. That's enlisted, and that is officer. So there's like 150 MOSs in our Army. And there's probably something for everyone, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's cyber, whether it's a nurse, whether it's a doctor career field. The Army gives more scholarships than anyone else in the nation for college, as an example. And we have that all posted on our Fort Bragg website, Facebook at Fort Bragg, and it kind of has scorecards or little baseball cards of all these opportunities out there. So something simple as believing in what we do, telling the story, and letting people know that are interested in here or qualified, great young men and women, that this is a great choice for them, however long they serve in this uniform. That would be much appreciated as well.
Yeah, I'll pile on to what General Kraft said. Recruiting, as I mentioned in my presentation, is our single biggest challenge. And his point about the recruiting effort, that's from the 30th of June to the 2nd of July, that those 10,000 volunteers that we're seeking is over a 3 to 4 day period before the 4th of July. So if you have the opportunity between now and then, up until the 2nd of July and even beyond, help us tell our story, invite us to help tell the story, and make us part of your own recruiting effort. Thank you.
And I'll just amplify that just a little bit more too as well, what General Kraft and Mr. Holcomb said. And we're blessed to be in the world's greatest army, and Fort Bragg and Fayetteville are a huge part of that. What's made it the world's greatest army, and so, just as the gentleman said, to tell that story. We know the families in our communities, all right, with service members who have served and the veterans or soldiers for life, regardless of the service for that matter, and to further amplify their stories of their patriotism, of why they served, and what did they see in their experiences, why they served as well, and tell that stories outside of Fayetteville. Fayetteville, I think this community knows it and embraces us, but to expand that outside of Fayetteville, wherever you go, to tell the Fayetteville story, to tell the Fort Bragg story of the goodness that our military brings to communities, and the support that comes to those families from the community, the outpouring that you all provide, as is exemplified here just by this council. But all the citizens of Fayetteville, for that matter, is just absolutely tremendous. The Army, by the way, is one of the largest provider of scholarships, actually, in the nation. And so communicate that too as well for folks that are interested in that as we continue to recruit. We always have to recruit, and just as we said, we got our Army National Hiring Days, big celebration of that effort. 150 plus different specialties or career paths to join into, and so we're excited to embrace that, and we appreciate your help with that.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Holcomb, Major General Kraft, Major General LeBeau, from Military Affairs Council, community of Fayetteville and Cumberland County, we appreciate you guys coming down today and giving us such honest and informative answers. And this concludes our 2020 command performance. And I just want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors again, our presenting sponsor, Campbell University, and our other sponsors, which include Manna Church, Piedmont Natural Gas, Methodist University, Duke Energy, and the Fayetteville Area Convention Visitors Bureau. Our media sponsors are Ray Magazine, Beasley Media, Cumulus, Fayetteville Observer, Up and Coming Magazine, and our annual sponsor, Coldwell Banker Advantage. And a very, very big thank you to the city of Fayetteville for putting this all together for us and letting us use the council chambers to put this on. And once again, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. And this concludes.